For it is Jesus, and he says her name. He says Mary. Do you remember? Do you remember in The Wizard of Oz that there's a point where the movie shifts from being in black and white to color? This is like that. Reality shifts. In this moment, everyone with a bad reputation is given hope. Given hope that that can go away. Hope that life can be restored. Hope that God can make all things new. Hope that death is not the last word. For us, you could interpret it this way. For us, it means Katrina didn't have the last word. Mary turns to Jesus and cries out in Aramaic, Rabboni, which means teacher. We're not quite sure. This may have been a very intimate form of address between a teacher and his students. But with a single word, Jesus has changed reality and history. He's come back from the dead. Nobody's ever done that before. Nobody's ever done that. It's a feat which has enormous consequences for all of us. There are three things I think that God is saying to us in the resurrection of Jesus. First, he's saying, it's real. It's real. If God can make the universe, if God can part the Red Sea and let a small people pass through, a people that are on foot trying to escape from the First Panzer Army, if he can make a whole valley of dry bones live, why can't he resurrect this man from the dead? Mary Magdalene did not go to the tomb expecting to find it empty on Easter morning. She expected to find a cold, lifeless corpse that was beginning to decay. She was going to anoint his body with oil because she loved him. Peter and John, who'd been with Jesus from the beginning, were not prepared for what they found. And even after they find the empty tomb, they're mystified. Even though verse 9 tells us they still did not understand from Scripture that Jesus had to rise from the dead. It's really real. The second thing we have to come to terms with is that the resurrection cannot be separated from the cross. And today we live in a world where many people are trying to do that. Much of the New Age movement is an attempt to take the love out of Christianity, take the joy out of Christianity, take the hope out of Christianity, but leave behind the cross. Oh no, none of that blood and gore stuff. But if you got to see Mel Gibson's Passion of the Christ, it was pretty bloody. It was very violent. It was vile. They were ready and often did beat prisoners to death. And Jesus has to sacrifice blood on the cross because a blood sacrifice was required. But it was a perfect sacrifice of himself. In a 1998 issue of Daily Guidepost, Penny Schwab tells a story about her two grandsons. And these two boys were visiting Penny's church on Easter, and Ryan was 6 and David was 4. Penny explained to each boy that the pastor was going to give them a small cross during the children's sermon to help them remember how Jesus had suffered and died for them on that cross. And at that point, young David said, I think I'd rather wait outside with my basket for the Easter bunny. And adults do that too. We do that too. We want Easter, we want resurrection, we want a second chance, but without the pain, without the sacrifice, without the despair. But Jesus is not warm and pleasant. Jesus is not warm and pleasant. And, you know, we have a good example of all of this here in the past. I mean, we are seeing wonderful things beginning to happen. The schools are literally coming up out of the ground. Houses are being built left and right. Walmart is coming back. And it's very exciting. Very exciting. But look, there's no excitement like this unless you go through Katrina. I mean, you can't rebuild your town if it isn't wiped out. Without the cross, there's no resurrection. I mean, they just go together, and that's the way it is. Mary did not recognize Jesus in the garden because her heart was breaking. And nobody wants to go through this. And Mary loved this guy. His whole nature, his whole ministry was about love and how brutally treated he had been. He'd been publicly humiliated. He'd been killed like the lowest of criminals on a cross. How could life be so cruel? Where was God in the midst of all this? And if you've never had to ask yourself those kinds of questions, well, you've been very lucky. You've been very lucky indeed. No cross, no resurrection. Now, the third thing God would have us know today is that the power of the risen Christ is still loose in the world. It's still loose in the world. Look at Trinity Church specifically. I mean, how could God allow a parish to be devastated not once but twice in 36 years? But I was sitting at a meeting this week, and something really remarkable happened. One of our parishioners told us about her son being shot in the quarter, son-in-law. And I looked at her, and she said, the bullet went right behind his head, passed through his ear, and lodged in his shoulder. He's walking around, I didn't take out the bullet. That's what you call a near miss. And then I realized 5 years before, his wife had been in a near-fatal accident outside of Jackson. The only thing left in the car that was still usable was the seat she was sitting in. You've never seen a German car that squish. I still don't know how she survived, but God does. Sitting across from the table from her was a woman who 5 or 6 years ago was discovered to have a very, very unusual disorder, and it almost killed her. Her husband was working in the 9th ward by himself, and a circular saw jumped out of his hand when he hit a knot, fell, and almost severed his right leg, missing his artery by 2 millimeters. That's what you call another near miss. So we've had a number of near misses at Trinity Church, and so many, in fact, that I think God is blessing us with his protection. 36 years ago, during Hardin and Trinity Church had to go through Camille, but they put it back, didn't they? And now we're on the way to doing it again. We're not going to be able to build 2 new buildings from scratch, but we're going to get actually 3 buildings back, because the one in the cemetery is going to be free. Why would God bless us with something like that? I don't know. We now have the largest staff we've ever had at Trinity Church. I don't have 1 deacon, I have 2. Why would God bless me like that? Because he knows I need lots of help. We now have 2 fabulous musicians, not 1. Up and down the Gulf Coast, I've been in all the Episcopal churches. Nobody has a better music program than us. We have the best pumpkin patch on the coast, too. And on it goes. Now, come on. This is the smallest incorporated community on the coast, and we got the best church. So why would God bless us if it's not because he wants us to be a blessing? He's putting not 1 school back across the street, but 2. We're now going to have 1,000 children across the street, right across the street. And I don't mean a 4-lane divided highway. I mean a country lane about that big. God is blessing us left and right to be a blessing. His power is loose in the world and empowers us to do what he's called us to do. How can we not use it? He calls us each by name. He doesn't want us to despair. He doesn't want us to suffer unnecessarily. He doesn't want us living in pain. But more importantly, he wants his will to be done. He wants us to help him build up the kingdom of heaven. He wants us to take up our crosses and follow him. And if we do,